This is the Frontline Focus Podcast, a show dedicated to those in the field focusing on their development as the key to the construction industry's progress. This is Season 1. Our focus will be on the hidden cost of safety. In each episode, we will talk with a construction industry professional to hear their thoughts about how to shift the frontline focus. All right. It's exciting times. This is a new show. It's a new effort. It's a new venture. And this literally is episode number 2 of the first season. And I'm joined by my longtime friend, my fellow safety professional, Daniel Maxson from New South Construction. How you doing, man?
I'm doing outstanding. I'm looking forward to this awesome discussion here. Like always, I think every time you and I get together, I think you can record it and make a podcast in itself. So great mind thinks alike.
Absolutely. We may have to start working on that more at public events. And joined, as always, moving forward, my tag team partner in this podcast endeavor. I'm joined by Gabe Guetta. How are you, sir?
Good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to honestly, I might do a lot of listening, sitting back, learning. Before we launched here, in the behind the scenes, I loved the conversation where it was going. I think, we need to get into a podcast right away because I'm just looking forward to the synergy between the two of you. It's great to watch.
Hey, when you've known each other a long time, when you're kindred spirits, when you share common values and beliefs, great conversations happen, right?
Worked at the same company together, or not together, separate time.
Yeah. It's an interesting world we live in, especially in the South, because back in the day, Daniel, you'll know this, there was not, unfortunately, that many safety directors. They really weren't, If you look at the lineage, and I'll pay homage to the agency, Georgia, they've done a lot to move safety in the right direction. But I can honestly remember sitting at that table originally when I was invited in 2001. Daniel, you remember there was that long table, that big, long, custom-made table, and we didn't need all the seats around it.
We did.
Now,
now it's like out there, and it's safety's still young, and I feel like just because everybody was all about what does OSHA say, now everybody's trying to raise that bar even more. And more, which is great, best practices, and a lot of subcontractors are getting on board as well, a lot of trade partners. And, I think I put Georgia up against a lot of states across the United States in the collectiveness and the outreach amongst safety professionals. And so it's outstanding. It really is.
Do you see, one of the things I've noticed in we look at North America as broken into many different kind of different states, different provinces, even globally, you look at the world of the UK, Australia, Canada, the US, like all different spots in the journey of adoption of health and safety. When you were looking at Georgia, like you said, one of the things I found was also not just more safety professionals, more companies starting to buy in. Are you seeing a lot of safety consultants also sprout up in those areas? I look at it almost like taxes, right? Tax is also government initiated and enforced. Safety is similar, but bookkeepers, accountants, when you look at safety, it's you have safety consultants, people to kind of translate the law, and then all of a sudden you start to see actual professional roles in companies, safety professionals, and now have a dedicated role. You're seeing VPs, directors, chief safety officers, right? At companies. Are you seeing the same thing, Daniel?
Seeing it across the board. I mean, I hate to call it a weed, but it's almost like safety professionals, third parties it's almost growing up like weeds, which is good because you have folks that are they'll be in a fish hatchery one day, then they'll be in a construction job site the next day. So you have to be very versatile. But I'm seeing across the board where a lot of folks are seeing the need for third party, and there is a strong need. A lot of companies, aren't quite ready for a full-time safety professional, and so there's a need for third party, and there's a lot of good ones in town and across the nation as well that are popping up. I challenge each one of them to actually learn more about the topic we're talking about today, and we'll get more into it let's just not only be in a bubble of compliance and best practices. Let's understand I always say a lot of times, the most important part of a claim it before the claim starts. And how do you set up? How do you engage? So if anybody's trying to get a nugget out, take that. That is the strongest nugget out. And there's a lot of folks that just needs the outreach. And you never know it all. Every claim has its own DNA, and more people need to know more about it. And I'm seeing a lot of, not to spill the whole pot of our conversation and all at once, but I'm seeing a lot of companies where they silo out responsibilities, where a risk management department will only focus and handle claims, and safety only does safety. And that is the disconnect. And safety and risk should be intertwined. I think that's probably why we're very successful, is because the risk department and safety within our organization is step in step on pretty much all the decision making, thinking, talking, because we are day to day on the job site, whereas a lot of risk individuals with contracts and everything else, they're tucked away in a job site majority of the times. And that, to me, does injustice in service to managing the overall essence of a claim. People aren't as empowered where they should be a lot of times. And I think that's a lot of times where we miss it, is that we have to understand that when we manage claims, it has to be lockstep with the safety professional, because they have the more of the say on the job site a lot of times, the more in touch.
That's a great way of looking at it. Somebody that I've become quite close with in one of our customers, it's a customer actually, Wilming Construction. The risk department bought the software and actually implemented it. And for a few years, the safety wasn't even engaged in it. And it was very interesting, because I've never actually seen that before in a company where risk ran with it. And one of the things he described is like, look, there's a huge overlap in the mindset around what the problems we're trying to solve on the risk side and the safety side. But he's like, really, I can't do my job without safety. And safety needs to learn about what I'm learning in my job. He's like, we care about what happens after risk. We care about what happens after the incident happens. How are we protecting the business? What happens? Safety, how will we prevent it from happening? Everything before that. I'm curious, Daniel, do you look at that the same way? Or and of course, that's a marriage that has to happen, because the similarities between the two are very common. But how do you look at it? Do you look at it as kind of those two worlds of like, yeah, safety is very much preventing that from happening. How do you protect the worker, everything else? Risk is a lot more, the pendulum swings more to protecting the business.
Yeah, no, I mean, risk is all about protecting the business legally, insurance wise, contract wise. They do so much. They're embedded. The devil's in the detail, right? And so that's a lot of times they're the front facing a lot of times with the insurance companies, where a lot of times safety is really like, hey, get over there, make sure our job's safe, and there should be more talking. And so, yes, I see a lot of that going on, and actually also speaking with a lot of my colleagues too, to understand, hey, you got to be a hybrid. You have to be a hybrid, because honestly, to understand how and what that claim happens, more of the details shake out as you learn more about how the actual injury happens, the mechanism injury, and various other body parts and whatever, how a claim shifts from, oh, my shoulder to now my back, because they might have spoken to somebody and various other things, and there might be some egregious whatever. So yeah, I'm seeing that's a very important item there, and that's a great question. More safety folks need to be involved in that process.
Yeah.
Well, so people can better understand the seat you're currently in, let's talk about your history, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know you have served our country, which I'm grateful for. Thank you for your service. Can you give us kind of, what's that background story, Daniel? How did you get to be sitting in the chair you're in to manage the program you're at, the work that you do? Where'd you come from, man?
So, well, just right out of high school, I didn't want to go to college right away, but so I chose to go into the Marine Corps. Got out, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do out of the Marine Corps. Then I found myself in a construction job site on a high rise in the middle of Orlando, Florida. 2 tower cranes. Who speaks English? Me. All right, jump on here and let's flag these cranes. And I was amped up, loved it. Got Red Bull every 5 minutes and a lot of other things. It was just awesome. I realized, found myself in the safety world, because it was also very dangerous. Saw some things that injuries, was part of injuries myself and various other things. And my daughter was born, found a new whatever in life, and so got into safety. My father's in this in safety as well, so he's like, "Hey, try this out," and I did. And so my journey of that of just learning, boots on the ground, helping people, underrepresented people, sometimes, you know, the ones that don't speak English a lot of times. And then found myself at the OSIP, the owner-controlled insurance program, overseeing multiple billions of dollars of work around the Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport. So on the owner end, well, we have to understand there's a difference between OSIP and CSIP in the insurance world of, hey, a owner, like a city entity, will take on the risk of saying, hey, everyone, don't worry about it. You're going to come under our insurance umbrella of coverage when you do work for us over here. Well, I was like, okay. Then you got the CSIP where contractors will say, hey, don't worry about it. You're coming onto my world. We will cover you from a contractor standpoint. So leave that at the door. And depends on if it's successful or not. Contractors or owners can actually see benefit, but ultimately they own the whole risk, right? So they're owning more of the risk and they have more control of it. And so that's why there's a lot of that in there. And so, went from the OSIP to New South, and the journey started there where I had to be a hybrid out the gate of understanding, hey, when an injury or incident happens, you know, we own dollar for dollar for the first $250,000 of every claim. So if 5 people get hurt, that's 5 times $250,000 that we have to manage. And I tell everybody, 99% of our claims are not our employees or injuries.
Right.
They're not ours. So we have to build a relationship with the workers. We have to understand, hey, we're here to help, and various other things. So you have to think outside the box. So the typical methodology of a safety professional or company or safety department is OSHA recordable rates. What are those? What is this a recordable as lost time or whatever? I have to approach it differently. You know, it's a lot of times from a CSIP. I mean, those are very important, but we have to manage the employee that we don't have a relationship with, because yes, whereas those numbers are important, the important thing is the employee taken care of. There's times where their medication have to elevate it, or we have to get into PT because that's what it calls for, and various other things. So you have to massage that situation and get out of the box of thinking of, I don't want a recordable, because the employee picks up on that. The injured worker understands and says, you're just trying to manage a OSHA record keeping item and you don't care about me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know I went, you know, that's my journey of understanding a lot of that. So
first off, I love how you went from a rigger to getting into safety. Not a standard journey. I don't know any other safety professional that's been, you know, rigger to safety, but that is a very high risk job, not only for the rigger, but the rigger is responsible for the safety of a lot of people. So many incidents happen from improperly rigged loads. You see it every year in any city. The other thing I wanted to tap into there, so when you're talking about workers, not yours, I'm assuming you're referring to subcontractors that you're having to manage. You're having to get their buy-in. You're protecting them. You're responsible because all the subcontractors are now on your insurance. You're telling them, hey, we'll cover insurance. Come work on this job site. Let's try and see if we can do it in a more efficient way. We can win the job together. Are you finding that in that mentality, do you find that the subcontractors are buying in more or less than if they're owning the insurance themselves? Like if it's more group and like the general contractor owns it, do you find that sub is like, well, it's on you, not as much as on me? I mean, in reality, it's on all of us. But what's the versus a sub that comes in and has their own insurance, they're reliable at a deeper level, or maybe not? Curious, is there a different buy-in that you're experiencing on that side?
there is at first for subs that aren't aware of it, and subs that are aware of it, because I want to say that our partnership, we try to form partnership. We try to build value, not only just with subcontractors and owners, but also our insurance broker. Our insurance broker, Aon, for example, we do a lot of wrap-ups with them. We have a great relationship to make it as simple as possible. There are certain contractors that are doing CSIPs that make it egregious and hard for contractors, and they don't like it, and they've had bad experiences. So with how we try to manage it, it's all about relationship across the board, and focusing on relationship and partnerships, and not only just with the workforce and the folks that you see on the job site, but the owners of companies, and understanding, what is their corporate policies, and meeting up with them at the beginning to say, hey, look, our philosophy within our company is that we try to partner with you. We're not here with a big fist to say, this is what you're going to do. This is a partnership. So it's those things.
Yeah. And I mean, we all, I'm sure, have friends or people we know that are not in construction. And I think until you actually work in construction, and especially at the level that we're discussing, you don't fully understand the complexity and the challenges of a construction environment. You are literally responsible for 40 different trades. That's 40 companies. Plus, I mean, like a high rise that I used to work on, 2,500 workers would easily go through that job site. 40 to 50 trade companies, 2,500 workers. Some companies will come in and they're, the bigger companies, they're going to have a safety professional. They might even have 10 or 15. They might have more revenue than the general contractor they work with. But then you also have that 5, 10, 20 person company that shows up on the job site, doesn't know safety, as in put on a hard hat, steel toe boots, doesn't have a clue about how to be compliant in creating a health and safety program, understanding how to implement it, everything else. And now and the reality is, general contractors, whether they're insured or not, they're liable for the people that work on their sites, right? So you now have to pull these people in and educate them. Construction doesn't have a gateway for education like healthcare or airlines, where if you want to get into this industry, you all have to have a standard of training. You're at the whim of the company that you start working with. And so I find it's so interesting, but I love the way that you're talking about it as a community, because you have to look at everyone as, we're in this together. We're as strong as the weakest link in this chain. If that 15, 20 person company that probably makes up 30% of the job site that trades on site doesn't get safety, we all fail, because they might be working over top of your crew, or they might be working, right? And so how do you, but let's maybe dive a little deeper in that, Daniel. What are you finding as the biggest challenges, or how are you solving that kind of on these, like, how are you finding success with this? Because obviously you said you're doing a lot of CSIPs. It must be working. What's the key to that? Because if you don't have a good system in place.
Key is not only just communication, it's effective communication. We have to understand that when we're talking with folks, that a lot of times we say, hey, we communicated this in the foreman's meeting, and it just stays there. It doesn't go beyond the door. And so how are we communicating to the actual boots on the ground that is actually putting the work in? And are we able to do it in multiple languages? So I pride myself in finding really good, professionals that are able to speak multiple languages. I speak multiple languages, and that's key, especially in the South, when probably about 85 to 90% of your job site do not speak English. And why does it matter? All right. And a lot of people will say, well, they're in America and they need to be able to speak English. I get it. You're probably right, but they don't. And so how are you going to effectively understand and get through to that individual? How do we get this going? And so it starts with communication. How do you manage your job sites based off positive recognition versus negative, right? You still got to have accountability. Are you embracing human performance concepts and understanding why does human error happen? And those things, looking at those techniques and understanding that people they don't come to the job site thinking they want to get hurt, right? Or cause something that's an event to go wrong. They come to job site wanting to get a paycheck. And so how do you celebrate success and get people showing off when you're walking around? And that's one of the biggest things when I'm walking around the job site. How is the posture? Is people hiding? How can we pull people out into the world of collaboration? Here, I appreciate what you're doing. Here's some glasses, or here's this thing, whatever. You did really good here. We're going to recognize you in our weekly safety meeting where everybody comes to one spot and we all talk together, and I'm going to celebrate those things. So those are little nuggets and things that we success. Focus on the positive reinforcement more than, and then when, not if, when an event happens, how are we communicating that? And is it a finger pointing? Is it a fact finding, or is it a fault finding? Because
Is
it's going to happen.
learning,
We
yeah.
got a human error.
Yeah, human error, these incidents are gonna happen. You gotta learn from them. I love the kind of collaboration and celebration mindset that you're bringing forward because, like you said, the reality is tradespeople are in the industry to get a paycheck. They want to go get a job done. A lot of them learn through, they're not an academic workforce. I wasn't. I'm terrible at academia, but I getting in there, building something, getting something done. And unfortunately, I mean, we were talking about this before we jumped on, but health and safety, it's going through an evolution right now. 10 years ago in construction in North America, safety was very different. There was very little of this conversation, and it was all just around wear that hard hat, steel toe boots, high vis vest, get your job done. If it's dangerous, do it on a Sunday when no one's around, right?
And get my name on that Porter John wall. As if I'm not doing my job if my name's not on the Porter John wall. That's not how it rolls. That should not be the way.
Exactly. And so that evolution is needed. And yeah, it's fun to watch the change happen. But the reality is safety is also viewed still predominantly as a barrier to getting the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Workers show up on site. They're there. They look at it as, shit, I got to do safety now. I'm going to try. And human beings are a time to value. I mean, we used to start cars with a key. Before it was a crank. Then it was a key. Now we're not even that. You got a key start. You're not using a push button. So we're always trying to find the fastest way to get something done. And unfortunately, people look at that barrier as safety, and that's got to break, right? How do we break through that?
The biggest thing is how can you make safety just part of the process? Stop writing another freaking policy. When a lot of it's not a knock on some of my colleagues that have, very thick safety manuals and want to create a safety policy because something happened. How can we get ingrained and make safety a part of is safety? I always say safety is a byproduct of a well-oiled machine. If they're doing good quality, are you pre-planning? Are you effectively communicating? Guess what a byproduct of that is? You're going to be safe and your quality is going to be up point and you're going to make money and be efficient. So how can you make communication, effective communication? How can you make pre-planning, good planning, and make rules that are follow KISS acronym, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right? Do not
Totally.
make it harder than it should be.
Totally agree. And I think we have to, safety is predominantly top down. Sometimes I was just saying this, it's a middle up, middle down. Safety is trying to get buy-in from executives and get buy-in from the field. But a lot of companies are now like, okay, ownership, everyone's bought in, but it's still down. How do you get that push from the bottom up? In reality, human beings need to feel like they're getting value out of something, right? How do they feel like they're getting value out of a safety process where they can start doing intuitively using safety? I say like reach for safety like you reach for a hammer. You don't tell a worker to use a hammer once a day and 3 times every second week or something. They intuitively reach for their hammer because they know it's going to solve a job that they get value out of. How do we get them to start reaching for safety in the same way? Intuitively buy into it. And I think it's exactly along the lines of what you were saying, Daniel. It has to tie into their natural workflows. It can't be separated out as in, okay, here's all this stuff you have to do, and now here's safety as like the ugly stepchild, right? But I think there's a lot there. Credibility.
It's building credibility. It's building, informing, and maintaining relationships, right? We're not coming in and saying, hey, I want to create this crazy rule or whatever. It's really just building credibility, ensuring that respect is earned and given. And then how does safety transform into the world of workers' comp and ensuring, what are the things that we have to look at? I live in a state and manage claims and what have you in a state that was voted number 1 judicial hellhole in America. Number 1. Think about that. Georgia, of all things. Is it mean because there's some state legislators that are governing the laws in Georgia? I think so. But if you look it up, that stat just says everything. Nuclear verdicts are a thing here in our world of understanding, like, is it that the laws are written a certain way? Are we understanding and managing claims better? If that's not the case. And then what are we doing ahead of claims and understanding, incorporating safety and workers' comp, and before the incidents happen, how do we intertwine that and work together on that? Those are the biggest thing. Over 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Think about that.
Yeah.
When something happens, worker thinks I'm going to get fired. And,
Right.
there are certain companies, believe it or not, and that's how I've been able to work with certain companies, when their philosophy is that person that got hurt, that's the first person I'll chop and block, because they just don't know. And what
Yeah.
people have to do, and companies and contractors have to start doing more of, is looking more into how to manage claims prior to, and or if you don't do that, have somebody do that. Maybe that is that third party individual that truly understands the spirit of managing claims as it relates to not only just injuries. We're talking about claims across the board, because GL has a way of creeping into people's pocketbooks as well. And so understanding those things is key. And I just barked off a couple facts about just Georgia. I'm sure there's some folks on here that are from other states like California and various other Western ones it's in New York, or ones that are, it's not a matter if somebody's getting an attorney, it's when. And when somebody gets an attorney, it's when somebody gets an attorney, that's when you lose control of a claim. Sometimes it's good for somebody to have an attorney because they are difficult, but a lot of times it's like, you have to manage through that process and stuff. So
Yeah, I think part of it is too, like we said, it's been the last 10 years, safety is growing so much. But where safety is today versus where it was 10 years ago, taking, like, I would say 50% of the construction industry holistically, just holistically, this is small companies to big companies, are still doing nothing when it comes to health and safety. Nothing. And so when you take a company that's doing nothing and you say, okay, you should be now benchmark them to a company that's doing everything, they just shut down. They're like, whoa, there's no way I can start doing all that and everything else. So I think part of it is like the early adopters of this mindset, the ones that truly are seeing, it's not just about protecting our workers, although it starts there. The amount of money we're saving, the amount of money we can make from this, the culture shift in our company, the efficiency, the productivity that we're getting out of our workers is exponentially larger. They get it. The other ones are so far behind, they don't even know how to catch up. So how do we step them along? How do we get them to, okay, don't worry about doing all of this yet. Just start by doing this one thing once a week. And then, 6 months later, do this, then do this, then do this. Because it's all in safety. There's no company out there that is perfect. It's all about progress.
There's the 4Ds: didn't document, didn't do. So start with the documentation process, right? I mean, I know that, you guys have a good platform that manages through those. It's all about the documentation portion. But yeah, start. Don't drink out of a hose right away. Don't go over there and try to, charge the hill. But understanding, one, it is important, right? Understanding that you have to, it's a principle that needs to be bought in from the top down all the way back up to the top. And it has to be truly understood in the process. And partnering with the right person that is going to manage the process with consistency, right? And then also, more importantly, understanding that you are only as good as the people you surround yourself with. As individuals, not just in safety, claims management, workers' comp, whatever you want to say, if you don't have a bubble that you can call somebody, then you're doing yourself an injustice in the profession. And that's probably why Georgia still is the way it is as a number one hellhole, is because more folks need to do better at understanding that, in managing overall safety process in claims and everything, it has to be better. It has to be better. And just reaching out. I do want to give it, there's these 5 principles of workers' compensation that we have to understand, that when something happens, it's number 1, pay. I mentioned earlier that over 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and any disruption of that can cause them, I gotta get an attorney, I gotta do these things, and it just throws things out of the whack. Number 2 is protection. Job security is key. We have to communicate when somebody gets hurt. It's okay. We're going to make sure we manage through this thing. We're going to overtake care of everything and understand how that takes place. Understand the workers' comp laws or claims laws, period, if in your designated state as well is key. Being a part of different associations in group settings. I know here in Georgia with the AGC, we started a group and others, and we started to making it a focus on how to manage claims, and let's talk through those things. Number 3 is prestige. We got injuries happen. We have to understand that that's going to happen. And so how many employees fear being judged by their peers? It's like, oh man, I hurt my back, but I don't want to say something. Yep.
Yeah.
So you got pay, protection, prestige, and then you got the process. Keep it simple. Don't parade this individual down, make this many rules or this many paperwork or whatever. Keep the process simple of understanding that when you're managing a claim, keep it simple. And number 5, paperwork. Ease the paperwork. You don't need a book to write on it when an incident happens. Keep it simple as much as possible. So you got pay, protection, prestige, process, and paperwork are the 5 principles of empathy for workers' compensation. That was done by Elise White, changeforwardindustries.com. She does really good at research, and she collaborated with an individual at the University of Texas, and they came up with those things, which that right there, those 5 simple things is super important while you're managing claims, especially workers' comp, as far as 5 principles of empathy and why it's important.
I love that. Rob, have you come across that 5 principles before, or is this new?
That's the first time that I've heard those. I think those are great nuggets to share with people to take and consider bringing them into your company. And then really, I think, they could help out with kind of the overriding theme we were wanting to ask you about of these hidden costs of accidents. You see a lot of claims. What are some things that you can share, and maybe it's from your OSIP side or even the non-OSIP side or CSIP side? What are things for companies and professionals to think about? You mentioned one, that fear of pay, because in Georgia, like we're talking about, if you're hurt, well, the statutes dictate, well, if they're out of work, this is how long they have to be out of work before pay kicks in, which my numbers are probably off, 7 days. And then the 21 days, and like we're talking, what are some other of those hidden costs to really be focused on in your proactive development?
So it's that big iceberg effect. Anybody has seen the iceberg effect of seeing on the surface, you see an iceberg. It's oh, that's not as big. And then you look below the water, you see this big glob of ice. That's huge. The indirect costs of understanding what goes into a claim. You can't really, and that's why it's called indirect, because it's hard to really put a number to it. Like how, when something happens, what is the slowdown process on the job site, and how do you get restarted? So is it the production aspect of it, the paperwork, the thought mentality? Instead of thinking about, these things to protect and be more productive, now you're thinking about a lot of people that is involved with it on the project and off the project now have to stop what they're doing and redirect energy to manage that process. So that's another indirect. You have direct costs that we all know. Okay, well, it costs this much for the body part or injured body. It's this much for this much for this. But then you don't see the big part. And that is the mental aspect of it. Somebody seeing something, and then how does that affect that one individual? Will that individual ever be the same again? The supervisor, man, I take full responsibility, and now I can't, and whatever. There's a lot of those things that get involved with those the costs of everything. You got loss of morale, legal issues. Obviously, back to direct, you got wages and equipment and the premiums and everything that can go up in time. And that's where a lot of people don't understand. When you talk about EMR, experience mod rate, everybody starts out with a 1.00. If it's above 1.00, you pay that much more in premium. If it's below 1.00, you get that savings back or what have you for your annual premium. And it fluctuates for the year and what have you. What does that mean? Well, if a company only has 30 to 50 employees, they have one injury, their EMR can skyrocket through the roof. And what does that mean? That means when they try to go get a job somewhere and a client has rigorous rules on EMR rates of being a certain height or whatever, they can't get certain jobs. So not only are they paying that much more on premium, but they're also now possibly not even being able to compete with others because their EMR based off of one injury. And so managing all those things, overhead costs, I can keep going on and on about the effects of costs and when injuries or incidents happens on a job site, how that could affect people, and why you should do stuff not only just from a safety standpoint and documenting various different things, but then how are you gonna put in place that when something happens, are you going to be well prepared? Do you have that process of communication, your paperwork on point, all these things? That's very important. If you don't get anything else in this podcast, besides safety is very important, you will also you need to make sure that it's before the claim happens and look more into it.
Man, that's a mic drop right there, dude.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you for sharing so many nuggets of wisdom, man. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of the Frontline Focus Podcast. Dana, we appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, love the conversation. Great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Great times. Cheers.
Very good stuff. Gabe, any final thoughts, sir?
No, I mean, that's like you said, mic drop. That's a good way to finish this off.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation, talking a lot about good stuff to move the industry forward. So with that, we will wrap this up for our second episode of Season 1. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Frontline Focus Podcast, powered by Salus. If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast player or leave us a comment to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep moving safety forward.